Coming up, actor Alfred Molina joins Illeana in just a minute.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
And now, it's the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast, starring Illeana Douglas. Eavesdrop with Illeana as she interviews Hollywood's most prominent players about filmmaking, acting, and what really happens on the set of your favorite flicks and TV shows.
Hello, I'm Illeana Douglas. Welcome to the I Blame Dennis Hopper podcast. I'm here with Tamara Berg.
Hi, everybody.
Rainy day here, perfectly fitting for our astonishing guest, Alfred Molina. I'm so excited.
So am
I noticed I met Alfred many years ago. I was on the ill-fated. Everything I'm attached to is ill-fated. Ill-fated or a cult classic, but I was on the both ill-fated and cult classic Action, and he was doing a sitcom right next door, and of course I was blown away. And he's not only is he just an incredible actor, he's a really, really nice person. So I can't wait to talk to him.
We've been having scones out in the green room
that you made. I know we're all a fluster. We're so excited that he's here.
Yes, we are. So I wanted to, I get questions from people on the street.
Yes.
And also from some of our Twitter fans who want to know, what's really Illeana really like? What are you really like? And I tell them you're a hag, of course. But no, just kidding. I never say that.
This is all for show. All for show.
So not true. So I wanted to ask you some just sort of basic questions about you and your life. And we're not going to go for a super long time because we want to reserve our time for Alfred. So you grew up in the East Coast, in Connecticut, right?
East Coast. I spent a lot of time in New York and in Queens with my Italian relatives. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, Melvin Douglas. So those are probably all the influences I picked up. I was really into movies. I'm still into movies. I mean, I find that I'm relatively the same. I don't think I've changed that much. I've tried to learn how to speak better, but that's about it.
So I'm a California girl. I've spent my whole life in the West, and you now live here.
I love it. I love California.
So tell me about that. Which do you like better? What do you like about both places?
I lived in New York when I thought it was the best of New York, which was the 80s, and I went to school there, an acting school, and New York was great. And then it became pretty gentrified, and I moved here around 1999. The first time I moved here was primarily for work. I didn't have the best time, and moved back to the East Coast. But by that point, I was doing theater. I don't know, New York kind of lost its charm for me. So this time when I've been in California, I've really loved it. Although, I don't go to the theater as much. I know, Alfred's doing a Long Day's Journey into Night. It is harder to go, in New York, you walk 5 blocks and you see a play. So it is a little more challenging to see theater here, but I think the culture is great, and the art and the architecture is interesting, and it's the movie business.
Right.
So I feel very connected to the history of Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I love it.
I mean, that's one of the things I love about Los Angeles is that art and in all ways of expressing it are available here. I was at LACMA on Thursday and then saw Alfred's play on Friday. And then, the LA County Museum of Art. Yeah, thanks, John. That's my job. I usually am the one who says that. And saw an incredible exhibit on Diego Rivera and Pablo Picasso together that was hosted by the curator. Anyway,
fascinating since Alfred Molina played Diego Rivera.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking while I was seeing it.
Part of the Cubist movement. Very sort of similar to Picasso, I think, in some of his, and of course he had the torrid relationship with Frida Kahlo.
Yes. Yeah. So it's an incredible exhibit. You should go see it. It's really amazing.
I would like to. So to answer your question, yes, I am exactly the same. In fact, people when people do stop me on the street, I mean, I was, somebody tweeted me, we're the Argentinian family that you stopped and you were in front of the dry cleaners and you took our picture and gave us directions to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So, yes, that's me. I'm like everybody's sister, I think. I'm nice to everyone. I'm thrilled to be in show business.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And I mean, I loved the conversation that you had actually with Bobcat last week. You were talking about how people have this impression of you being quirky and,
Right.
The whole wardrobe thing. Yeah.
Yes, there's a hipper. When I get cast as Illeana Douglas, she's kind of hip and her voice is a little lower and she's very sardonic and sarcastic and always just very quippy, and that's not really me. I'm more, as Bobcat says, I'm a total nerd. I'm home, like looking at movie books, reading my Piper Laurie biography currently, or my Ida Lupino books, or So I'm home. I'm home. That's what I wrote in the end of my book. It was like, she's probably watching a movie right now. So that's me. I watched 2 films yesterday. I've got Criterion, and I'm usually always watching a movie or the Food Channel or House Hunters.
House Hunters.
That's it. That's all I'm into.
So you're pretty much stuck being an actress now. I mean, you've been in it long enough that you have to stick with that one.
Yes.
I was thinking the same of Alfred earlier this morning.
So
but
incredible.
if you didn't have the job that you have,
right,
what are some other jobs you would like to have? I'm sure retail is one of them.
Do I get to be in the movie business or outside the movie business?
Both.
If I was outside the movie business, I did, when I worked for IKEA, I actually really loved design and picking colors and what's the color of the season and things like that. So I think it would be something to do with design, because I think you need to pick something that never bores you.
Yeah.
And so, when I'm lying in bed and I can't sleep, I rearrange my room, or I think about what color fabric I'll get for a sofa, or things like that. It's an exciting life.
It is.
Being in my brain.
Illeana's either watching a movie or rearranging furniture.
Incidentally, the color is pumpkin, if you're curious.
Okay.
I'm going from royal blue to pumpkin.
Okay.
And I'm thinking pumpkin, and then I'm thinking of paint colors.
Yes.
There's a great, what are you laughing about? This is what girls think about.
It's true.
The girls have their own language.
Yes, we do.
While you guys are in the locker room with your Trump talk, we're talking colors. Benjamin Moore pigeon. Let's just say.
I was actually looking at fabric for my sofas just yesterday.
What about wall colors? It's very important to have a wall color where you look good behind it.
Oh, absolutely. And lighting that is flattering.
Yeah.
Some of my friends are interior designers, and we've talked extensively about lighting.
That's harder. That's harder to do. But I paint frequently. I frequently
good for you.
change the colors. The blue room is now the gray room.
Oh,
so I moved my movie posters around. I have a large bunch of movie posters that I move around. Anyway.
And within the movies,
yes.
What would you do as a job if you weren't an actor?
Within the movies, of course, I'm going to go with being a director. That's I've always had that, and if I were not allowed to be a director, I would have to say, again, I'd go into art design.
Yeah.
And props. I love, from when I was a little kid, I would always arrange everything, and I wrote about this in the book. My grandfather had all of his awards were in his closet. So when he would go away, I'd take all the awards out, and I would display them, and then I would take a picture
artfully,
and then I would arrange everything as if it was a little motif, and then put everything back. And I still have. Those were some of the pictures that did not make the book. So many great pictures did not make the book.
Make the second book, maybe.
Hopefully, yes. I would like that in my second book, the darker version.
Oh yeah.
All right,
Dennis Hopper After
Dark. Is it time for the wonderful Alfred Molina?
In.
Of course, I discovered Alfred Molina in Prick Up Your Ears. Other people know him, of course, from Raiders of the Lost Ark, Chocolat, Spider-Man, Enchanted April, another movie he's incredible in, and Education. I'm talking about you as you come in. You've been on television, Law and Order. I said I noticed no ladies' man is in your bio. is in your bio. And you're going to be on TV again in The Feud with Ryan Murphy, and you're currently in Long Day's Journey and Tonight. And it's a pleasure to have you here.
I look as if I'm playing with myself, but I'm actually just rolling up my sleeves.
Rolling up your sleeves.
At least half of our audience is only listening, so
Right,
they don't even know.
Do you watch your films?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean,
Oh my
eventually,
God, I forgot to mention Boogie Nights. I was doing how could I? Jesus, my apologies. 20,
right.
Wrong with you?
20 loud. No, because
That's all right.
most people have to read off a card, but with you, I was going by rote and then sighing after each.
So true.
I said, "Oh, and Education is so incredible." But yes, Boogie Nights and another amazing performance. And what audacity that you had.
Well, it was kind of, a lot of that really was thanks to a wonderful director. Paul Thomas Anderson just gave us such wonderful freedom, really. He was very, very collaborative, very, very much into letting his actors make contributions both to how to play the scene, dialogue, and so on. And he was very free and very relaxed. And I was really impressed because I think I'm right in saying that was his second movie.
Yes.
Hard Eight being the first one. And there was such assurance in the way he handled a very complicated subject matter, but also complicated scenes. That first sort of 8-minute sequence, all one take on a steady cam, coming down on the cherry pick and then into the club. I mean, he told a story that he got a phone call from Steven Spielberg, who asked him directly, "How did you do that shot?"
Wow.
And Paul said it was like getting called into the principal's office. As if he had to somehow, like he'd broken some terrible rule, and and apparently Stephen sort of said, "Well, no, I really want to know how you did it." It was like, because it was absolutely seamless.
It's incredible.
And so full of information and visual kind of information about the story. You got into these people like so quickly, and so there was a real. I mean, and the job really came by. I heard, now I don't know how true this is, but I heard that an actor had already been cast in the role, and he dropped out for one reason or another, very much at the last minute, because I got a call from John Lyons, one of the producers, who I had known years before when he was still a casting director. And he just called up and said, "We've got this part. It's going to be 4 days' work. Do you fancy?" And he said, and he kind of intimated that it was kind of like a favor. And I thought, yeah, I'm not working. Oh, sure, yeah. I said, "What is it?" And he said, "Well, do you want to? I mean, do you want to talk to the director?" I said, "No. If 4 days, it'll be fine. I know. I saw Hard Eight. I loved it. And I knew. And he gave me the list of some of the actors involved. And I thought, this sounds great. And so anyway, PT called me and we had a very nice chat. And I said, "So what's the part?" And he basically said, "Well, it's a coked up drug dealer on a shotgun rampage." And I kind of went, have I ever played a coked up drug dealer? No, I'll do it. Okay, sure. And I turned up, and it was 4 days of absolute joy. It really was. Because there was no. I mean, I don't know how he dealt with it in terms of his second movie. I'm sure for directors, there's a lot of pressure, especially if your first movie is received so well and so kind of enthusiastically. There may be a lot of pressure to really pull out the stops on movie number 2. But he seemed so relaxed about the whole thing. And, that kind of atmosphere starts at the top and works its way down.
Right.
If the boss is relaxed, then invariably the mood on the set is going to be good, And it was just fantastic. And just hanging out and playing with these wonderful actors, Philip Seymour Hoffman, God rest his soul, and Thomas Jane, and Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly. I mean, and nobody was quite who they are now in terms of their status and their notoriety and their fame. Everybody was sort of, they were up and comers. But you could tell there was this incredible level of excitement, and I think they all, especially the actors who were much further into the shooting process than I was. I mean, I just turned up for 4 days. I mean, there were guys there who'd been there, you know, Julianne Moore and Heather. I mean, they'd been there for weeks.
I was going to ask you, that's one of those things that can sometimes be challenging when you show up and you have a limited amount of time and you don't know what the tone of the movie is.
Well, I had the advantage that, excuse me, I'm taking my watch off because it keeps on banging on the tabletop.
I'll take that.
I'll
take that, sir.
I had the advantage of really absolutely not knowing what I was doing. You know, and in a way, I'm not being facetious, well, only a little bit, but in a way, that's kind of freeing because I really didn't have time to prep. I didn't have time to do any research. I mean, because the character's based on a real person, or loosely based on a real person. I had no time to kind of. All I did was learn Bobby's Girl, you know, the song that I had to kind of mime to, and you know, because Petey said something like this. You really have to know that song well because this is like this character's kind of signature tune. This is like his favorite. He said, think about what was your favorite tune when you were a teenager. And I remember saying, well, mine was, you know, What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, you know, Jimmy Ruffin. And he went, well, like that, but it's Bobby's Girl. So I spent literally 3 days just playing it over and over again. And but that was about it. So I turned up kind of a little bit free and loose, you know, which I wouldn't normally do or indeed normally kind of recommend.
Right.
To an actor. You know, I wouldn't say, oh, yeah, just go in there and just have no clue. You'll be fine. But this time it seemed to kind of work.
And you're shooting at night.
A lot of it, yeah.
And how do you feel about night shoots? Because I find them to be very tough.
I think it's
keeping your energy up.
Yeah, I think night shoots, as I'm getting older, I'm realizing it's very much a young person's game. You know, I used to love night shoots. When I was a young actor, I used to love them. There was nothing more romantic than turning up at like 11 o'clock at night and knowing you're going to be shooting, you're going to see the dawn coming up and everyone's going to kind of like have like dinner for breakfast. It's going to be so cool. You know, but when you're like, you know, in your 60s, you kind of start, you see N scenes 3, 4 and 2 on a call sheet. Your heart sinks a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
And then I think about the guys who did the Martin Scorsese movie, the Nicolas Cage movie, Bringing Out the Dead, or you know,
40 Nights.
Yeah, 40 Nights. I mean, that must have just done them in.
But if it's all night,
then I go, yeah.
Once you go into night,
you lose your marriage and your family life, and you know, everything else in your
sanity.
life falls away.
Tell everyone what splits are, because splits are the worst.
Oh yeah, well that's like when you're kind of not quite a day shoot, not quite a night shoot. It's like a bit of each.
Twilight.
You know, so you sort of you start work at maybe noon, and then you finish, say, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And that's, you know, or my favorite is the Saturday shoot. When
That's television.
Yeah, when you've got, you've got the Sunday off,
brutal.
or the Saturday and the Sunday off, so you
Yes.
kind of work Friday, you work right to like 2, 3 in the morning, Saturday morning.
And so when you're doing a part, I wrote about this in my book, I would go back to my trailer. I can't nap. I listen to music. That's my thing. And so by the time I'm done, I'm wrung out because I'm actually in my trailer. I can't eat. I have to just listen to music and I dance. Those are my two energy.
Well, no wonder you're exhausted.
No.
But I have because
You're a fool to yourself, Illeana.
because I need to. Well, and then if it's something emotional, it's like you have to pump the
Dancing
well.
and crying.
I cry a bit. I go, okay. The emotion has to, see, I can't.
Well, it's interesting, this thing about listening to music, because I came rather late to that little sort of thing, because I never did that. I used to find it a little distracting somehow. So I would like just read the script, or I'd read stuff to do with the story, you know, like background material and things to keep myself, you know, and it was only when I started, when I did Frida with Salma Hayek. Salma used to listen to music to kind of get herself into kind of like an emotional space for a particular scene. And I never asked her what she was listening to, but I could see she'd be in the corner with her headphones on, and she told me it was music. And I thought, well, I may ought to try this, you know. And I started doing it. I started like finding kind of soundtracks or pieces of music that might have some relevance to the job at hand. And
Right.
I find it incredibly helpful now.
Yeah, I wrote it in the book once that we had a bad camera shot, and I had done it organically, and we had to redo it. And I said, I'm going to need like 10 minutes. And I went and found a song that meant something.
Well, I
to
guess
me.
it's because music is like, music's very evocative. It's very emotional. We have an emotional response to it, don't we? So if you find something that triggers
Yes.
something that is going to be useful in, to the job at hand, I mean, it makes complete sense.
I'm also curious about your outfit in the movie. Did you pick the robe, or because again,
Boogie Nights.
It's so iconic. Like, when you go to the costume, or do you like to be involved in choosing?
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, sometimes it's not always.
Again, it's a very vulnerable for those people who don't know. I find that, again, that's when I get scared. Like, you get the part, and there's a lot of exhilaration, and then I always feel a little scared. Like, they have a rack of clothes, and I get nervous. Like, I have my own ideas, and I don't.
Yeah. Well, I tend to let myself go into the hands of the designers. I try, unless it's something that's really ugly or just it's so clearly not the character.
Right.
Sort of. We thought we'd have you in canary yellow, Fred, for the funeral scene. If it's something really, you kind of go, I don't think so. But usually, I tend to let because I think, well, they probably know better than me. I mean, if it feels right and if it looks okay, then I'm, I don't come in with any strong ideas about my character wouldn't wear this or my,
Yeah.
And but I think it's very, unless you're doing, I mean, like, unless you're wearing a costume that's really like a costume, like like the stuff I had to wear when I was doing, like, say, for instance, Spider-Man 2,
Right.
which isn't really clothing. It's kind of it's evoking all kinds of other imagery and storytelling. Then you're completely in the hands of the designer. Sort of. I could always I always imagine sort of actors playing superheroes kind of saying, does this cape make my ass look fat? Do these tights work? I always think these aren't the questions you'll be asking.
So let's go back in time. My favorite question, of course, what was the first movie that you saw? Now, I read something, I don't know if that is the same movie, but I read that it may have been Spartacus.
Well, Spartacus was the first movie that I saw where I consciously remember thinking, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what, and I think I must have seen movies before that. In fact, I know I did. But that was the first time, and I don't know whether, and I don't think it's because I suddenly wanted to be Kirk Douglas. It wasn't that. It was something about, I think, I was 9 years old, so I couldn't have been thinking on any very sophisticated level about the craft of acting or whatever was involved. But it was something about that story and the way they looked and the way they behaved. I suddenly thought, yes, I could maybe do that. And then, but it wasn't until much later that I realized that's what happened. I mean, I think immediately after seeing it, I think it just became just one of my favorite movies. But I remember being asked in an interview once about, what is, a list. I was given a list of films, to kind of make a quick comment about. And Spartacus came up, and I kind of went, yeah, that was when I kind of went, oh yeah, that's when the light went on in my head,
Well, it's an old-fashioned, pot boiler. It's got these great characters. Have you ever been? I know recently when they did the re-release of it, getting to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, that was fantastic. With all the cut scenes put back in.
Oh my God,
what do you prefer, oysters or is it oysters or
snails?
Snails. Yeah, I like them both.
You know who kind of steals the movie too is Peter Ustinov. Are you a Peter Ustinov fan?
Huge fan.
He's been sort of forgotten. And whenever I see him in a movie, boy, he was.
Oh, he was a wonderful actor. And oddly enough, during the filming of Prince of Persia, we had long chunks of time just sitting around talking and sort of waiting for things to get set up and stuff. And we started playing this game where we would imagine the movie Prince of Persia being made 10, 20, 30, 40 years earlier, and we would cast it with who we thought would be playing those parts in that era.
Yeah.
And I remember when we said, well, if this was like the late 50s, who would be, and everybody, when it came to who would be playing my part, everybody kind of went, Peter Ustinov. because he was a kind of roguish villain. He was like a comedic villain.
Right.
And of course, Peter Ustinov, that was his stock in trade. He was so brilliant at those kind of slightly sleazy, slightly comical, but slightly dangerous characters.
Yeah, always had something going.
Yeah, I
on the
loved him. I
side.
loved him.
Now, speaking of English cinema, when you were growing up, what kind of movies were you seeing? Were you seeing like Ealing's comedies? Were you into the angry young man, kitchen sink?
Not really. I was into American movies. I've always been a big Western fan. I love Westerns. I love war movies. All the things that young boys, you could imagine young boys getting into. And so much of the product that we saw in that. I mean, I was born in 1953, so I started probably going to movies on a regular basis by 1961, 62. And certainly, but maybe before that with my parents. But I remember all the big movies were all American movies, the Westerns and the cop movies and the gangster movies. And I loved them all. And in fact, I can remember, plus the stuff that we saw on TV, all the big sort of American series, I can remember playing in the street with my friends, and we would act out scenes. We would play cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians and stuff like that, and we would do it with American accents. We'd be running around kind of going, hit him off at the pass, oh, you got me, copper, and it was all like dialogue that we were picking up from films and television. And so I loved those. Any kind of Western I would go and see. I remember telling somebody once years ago, I'd rather go and see 3 bad Westerns than a really good Chekhov play.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, I love Chekhov. Don't get me wrong. But the thing is, that was the stuff that kind of excited me, and I think it was something to do with the language and the accents, and there's always been something. In terms of language, there's always been something incredibly muscular about the way American English is used in films. There's something kind of taut and sinewy about it, and incredibly economical. So there's a sort of, I don't know, there's something about it that's very kind of, there's a tautness to it, which I love.
I see what you mean, because if you take a British war movie, like Life and Times of Colonel Blim, everybody's British, but an American war movie, there's the Italian, the Irish guy, the tough. They used
well, because the Brits always assume that they won World War II all on their own.
They didn't have any G.I. Joes around.
There were lots of G.I. Joes. What they used to say. The Brits used to talk. They had this joke about the American GIs in England during the war. They used to say it was oversexed, overpaid, and over here.
Oh.
But there's a good reason for that, because the American GIs, when they came over, what really pissed off the Brits was that they were much, much better looking. They had great teeth. Their uniforms really looked good. They looked great in those uniforms. They fit them, and they smelled good. And more importantly, they had money. That was the thing. A regular American serviceman was actually, in terms of when you made the equivalency in pay, the average American serviceman in World War II was actually earning the same amount of money that a British officer was making.
Wow.
So they had money. That's why they were so popular. I mean, it was so the Brits were like really a little bit ticked off. They turn up late and they get all the credit. There's all that going on.
One of the quotes I read about you said, "I'll do anything. I'm a bit of a slut that way."
Yeah.
And now, is that because you come from a kind of a working class background?
Maybe. Well, yeah, I guess. Although,
or is it just fun to work?
Well, I think all the above.
Christopher Walken. I once asked Christopher Walken about early on. I was doing a movie, and like, what do you do when you turn a party? He goes, "Oh, I take everything I'm offered."
Yeah.
And it changed my life. I was like, "Yeah, what the?"
I've
there's
basically
no
done that. No, there's no. I've basically done that. My only criteria I remember when I was at drama school, for instance, all my contemporaries were talking about they were making plans, and we all had fantasies and dreams about what we wanted to do, obviously. And people would be saying things like, "Well, by the time I'm 30, I want to have played Hamlet before I'm 30," or by the time I'm 40, I want to have played all the clowns in Shakespeare, or by the time I'm and I would go along with all that and kind of nod and kind of think, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." But in my heart, in my head, I was thinking, I just want to work. I want to do everything. And I did. I'm still a little bit like that. I mean, I love working, but I just remember my only driving, and I think because my parents kind of had long stints of like not working and being out of work and all that stuff. Particularly after my parents divorced, my mother struggled. I lived with my mum, and she, she struggled. I mean, she struggled to make ends meet. And wanting to be an actor seemed like such a selfish luxury, and so I think partly to mitigate that, I just took everything and made sure that I was just always working. So when a job finished, I remember going from doing oddly enough a Chekhov play in a very respectable, very reputable regional theatre in the UK, and then my next job 2 days later was doing this kind of really crappy commercial for some chamois leather product, and everyone's kind of going, "But you just did," I said, "Yeah, I know, but I'm getting paid."
So was she able to see you succeed?
Yeah, she
so that's
did.
Great.
She died quite young. My mum died just before my 30th birthday, like 1983, and she saw Raiders. She saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. By then she'd retired and she was living in Italy. She'd gone back to Italy, to the village where she was born, and she was incredibly supportive. I mean, she was really supportive, and she used to come to, when I was doing plays, she would always come every opening night, and she always wore the same outfit. She wore this kind of she had this fake fur coat, which she would wear, she was very proud of it, which she would wear over this kind of twin set, like a skirt with a sort of, cardigan and sweater thing, and these pearls. That was like her going out outfit. And she would always get a seat in the front row, and regardless of what she saw, I mean, she saw some rubbish, she would come backstage afterwards and she would always say the same thing. She'd always say, "Alfredo, that's the best thing I ever see you do."
Aww.
Every time. Until I did a play where I was basically playing one of 3 guys who were gang raping a young girl. And the play opens with us dragging her. She's in a car naked because she's been making out with her boyfriend. We arrive. This is at the Royal Shakespeare Company, by the way. So I'm not talking about some nonsense, downtown somewhere. We drag her out of the car, and there's this very graphic gang rape, which opens the play, which we played to the sound of seats flipping up, as people walked out in droves. My mother came to see it, and I'm thinking, she's going to kill me. She's going to hate me. I take her out for a drink after the show. We're sitting in the bar next door to the theatre. I'm introducing her to a couple of the other actors, and she doesn't say anything. We're talking about everything except the play. But she had to find something positive to say. So as we're leaving, and I called a taxi, I get her into a cab to take her home, and as she's getting into the cab, she says, "Alfredo, the girl that you rape in the play, beautiful legs." She had to find something positive to say. So she saw some stuff.
So I didn't realize. So your mom had a thick Italian. I mean, I
my
know
mother was
that
Italian.
your
My
background
father
is,
was Spanish.
But she had a thick accent.
Yeah. My parents never lost. They both had a really innate gift for languages, and they learned each other's language. They learned English. They both spoke French, just by coincidence, and they all had they could read, write, and speak fluently in 4 languages. But my mother left school at 15. My father left school at 14. It was just a gift that they had, and and they used it. You know, they both worked in the catering business in London. And although they spoke English very well, they never lost their accents. And in fact, my father, who had a very thick Spanish accent, he learned English through proverbs and colloquialisms. He kind of would pick them up and memorize them. So he kind of learned English. Like I always used to describe it as kind of learning English through the back via the back door. So his English was peppered with sort of, you know, well, you know what they say, many cooks may like work. Or, you know, it's raining cats and dogs. You know, it was like,
Yes, my grandmother.
You bet your bottom dollar.
My grandmother would always. My grandmother was Italian too, and she'd always say, "Ooh, watch you when you fall." No, it's she'd always like get it slightly wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
She'd say, your father, he's got his good faults." Now, that's one of the things
I love that.
One of the things I love about watching you in films is that there's such a humanness and a vulnerability, even when you're playing bad guys. There's always something, you know, underneath that and I mentioned the movie again, An Education. The movie is a killer for me. But there's, you know, is that something that bleeds through from you? Are you aware of that? Or...
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I think I'm glad if that's there, then I'm delighted. But I'm also a little bit worried because whenever I've played bad guys, I try and be really bad. But maybe I'm not succeeding.
But it's a likability.
He's trying to be bad, bless him. Look. Oh,
Bless his heart.
The other night...
He can't stop that sweet. Oh, look. Oh, look, he's getting angry. Look.
But see, to me, that's... I was watching the other night, talking about Westerns, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, Lee Marvin.
One of my favorites.
Even John Ford was afraid of Lee Marvin. I was reading about it, he was like, no, I don't give him any direction. He's like, he gives me, but you're playing a villain is, it's very fun. And
yeah. Well, I think there's, I always think if, I'm glad that, without being sort of silly about it, I'm glad that is coming
I'm
through.
on your side.
I appreciate that because I think it's human, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of...
I see your point of view, which is I think is important sometimes when someone is playing a villain and not just the vulnerable parts. But I love a movie where I'm conflicted. I don't want to feel as if,
there's a wonderful freedom when you're playing the villain. Bob Hoskins, the late great Bob Hoskins, once said that he was asked in an interview how come he was turning up in so many movies playing kind of like little cameo roles, but he was playing like kind of like a bad guy, the gangster or the kind of the villain. And he said that he loved it. He says you work half the amount of time of the leading man. They treat you like the crown jewels. And if the movie sucks, nobody blames you.
That's true.
And the thing is, if you're playing the villain and the movie happens to be a bad one, no one points at the villain. No one kind of goes, the villain screwed that up. The villain ruined it.
It's true.
And I think that's because there's a kind of freedom in playing the bad guy. You can be, you can legitimately chew a bit of scenery if you choose to.
Right.
And audiences love it. I mean, it's a kind of release valve from any kind of like moral imperative that the leading characters are following. The villain is often a release from that, the antithesis of that. So you can have a lot of fun. And aren't you worried about being typecast as the villain? No, never.
I've never seen. What's interesting is I don't see you getting typecast as the villain because again, you've played. It's not like you've consistently played villains. You played varied other.
I've been lucky.
Parts.
I mean, it's that's one of the advantages of the philosophy of just taking everything you're offered. Because you look back on. I mean, I've been acting for nearly over 40 years now, and I look back on movies, and there's no discernible pattern. I never had a game plan. It's just like this crazy quilt of stuff. And I think that's one of the advantages of always saying yes, is that you end up after a while, you end up and you think, wow, yeah, I did that and I did that. And I think all of it eventually feeds into a sense of understanding, a sense of self-knowledge, a sense of feeling that you kind of maybe might be close to knowing what you're doing, you know.
Do you think that I want to go back now to, the first time I saw you in a movie, which was Prick Up Your Ears, and getting involved to work with somebody. It's so funny to track you from Prick Up Your Ears to Spider-Man. I mean, who knew? Because when I saw you in that film, I would have predicted, that he's going to play bad guys and scare, psychos and something like that. But getting involved in a movie like that was so dark, and how did that come about, working with Stephen Frears, who just came off of My Beautiful Laundrette?
That's right, and it was, and also, if you remember, in the mid-'80s, certainly in the UK, and I suspect here too, stories with openly gay characters wasn't really the norm.
No.
I mean, Beautiful Laundrette really kind of broke some ceilings,
Right.
broke through some ceilings. And then to follow up with something like Prick Up Your Ears, although it was a true story, and the people involved had huge notoriety at the time. Joe Orton was a very successful, highly visible playwright, and his lover, Ken Halliwell, became notorious, after both their deaths. But it wasn't the sort of the norm to see these kind of stories, and there was originally the very first sort of manifestation of Prick Up Your Ears. It was going to be, I think Ian McKellen was in the frame to play Ken Halliwell, and then I think the money fell through, something else happened. And then Stephen had to kind of start again. And then by then, Ian, I think, had moved on to something else. And then it was Gary and I were in the frame. And so it was a very, very exciting prospect. I'd never played a part that big in a movie before. It was like my first proper kind of leading role. And I was terribly excited. It was a wonderful script. Alan Bennett's script was just fantastic. I knew a little bit about the Joe Orton, Ken Halliwell sort of scandal, and it just felt. And also I'd known Gary before, because Gary and I had worked in the theatre before. So there was a kind of, we were all sort of in this mix of, everyone was like doing something new for the first time. And it was just the most wonderful, wonderful experience from that point of view. And I always sort of thank Stephen, publicly as well, because he was encouraged not to cast me. For many of the reasons that he's too big, he's too ethnic looking, all those kind of things, and he just said, but I think it's going to work, and so he was very loyal in that regard, and I've always been very grateful to him for that.
Did you just give an amazing audition, or did you meet him? Or?
No, what happened was I went to his apartment, I went to his house. Alan Bennett was there. And we just read a few scenes. And then he kind of very casually said something like, well, would you like to do it? And I, trying to match his casualness, kind of went, yes. I remember my voice went up an octave. I was trying to be really cool. We were in his kitchen, in his rather nice, sort of rather shambolic kind of bohemian house in Notting Hill, and scrub pine tables and copies of Architectural Digest all over the place. And I was feeling terribly kind of, hey, I'm part of this now, but I tried to be very cool, but I wasn't. I was, terribly excited.
So once you get the part, are you at all concerned? And you said you knew Gary before. Do you get concerned at all? Like, okay, now I'm going to have to make out with Gary.
No, I didn't mind. No, that in fact, that was the last thing I was worried about, funnily enough, because, Gary, I'm an enthusiastic heterosexual man, but Gary's a very attractive guy. So I had no problem with that. But I say what we did do, what was interesting, is we both had a similar idea, which we did together.
Yeah.
We spent about nearly a month together, just hanging out nearly every day, and just working on a timeline for our characters from when they first met, when they were at drama school in the 50s, to when they, to the very end of the movie. And all the events in the script, we tried to tie to actual moments in their real lives. And then we started doing some detective work. We started talking to people who knew them, tracking down people who were in their drama, who were in their class at drama school and so on and so forth, just doing kind of the basic kind of research that you would do. And it was like a kind of like a bonding process. You know, Gary and I got to know each other very well during that. So when the scenes came to where we had to be really kind of emotionally vulnerable and open to each other, it was kind of easy because we were already kind of chums, you know, and so it became like a natural development. You know, it wasn't awkward in any way.
And how did you feel about Hallowell? Did you feel that he was somebody that was a tag along, or that he really was, you know, that he really had made this great sacrifice for Orton?
Well, I think there's like in any other kind of human relationship, there was a huge complexity, which is that they were both, in a sense, good and bad for each other. Ken had aspirations to be a writer, to be an artist, which he felt at some level had been thwarted by Joe's huge success. He also felt that Joe hadn't ever given him the right amount of acknowledgement in terms of his contribution. Joe as well felt, as his success grew, felt that Ken was becoming a bit of a hindrance. He was socially awkward. He was difficult. He was a snob. He was a bit of a poseur. Ken was socially became increasingly a liability. Plus the fact that Joe was also becoming increasingly sort of unfaithful and was kind of playing away from home a lot. Ken was sexually and emotionally kind of very, very trapped and sort of thwarted in himself. So there was all these factors going on. Plus they were living in this really weird situation in this tiny little room. You know, there was a kind of, the relationship was clearly sort of, they were enabling each other in the worst possible way.
Right.
And then, of course, afterwards, after Ken killed Joe and then killed himself, and ironically, apparently, the story goes that after Ken smashed in Joe's head and then started taking all the Nembutals, he actually died first. Medically speaking, he was apparently dead before Joe was. And there's a wonderful moment in the film when, after he's killed him, Ken has this little speech where he says, I should have been the writer. I came from a broken home. I'm homosexual. I can't, I'm socially inept. It's practically a blueprint to be an artist. Something like that. And I really felt for the guy. I wasn't exactly on his side in the sense that, he was hard done by, but I felt like I could understand where he was at. And also, given the period that when it was happening, if this relationship had been happening now, both of them would have got a lot of help.
Right.
I think people would have recognized the signs and stepped into maybe.
Well, this is a time where homosexuality it's still illegal.
It was only just legalized. Homosexuality was decriminalized in 1967. Oh. So it was kind of, they were just, but it was years before men could, have any kind of public displays of affection or even hold hands. I know a lot of, I have friends who are my age who were young gay men back in the 60s and 70s, where even though the law had changed, there's no way now they are themselves. They still can't hold hands. These are men who have been together 40 years. Because of the period that they grew up in.
Yeah. You know what's something interesting about the film, and I don't know if you ever experienced this, but the movie came out when I was in acting school. And
Where did you go to school?
I went to the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York. And a lot of the actors found the film very seductive. I know it's just, everybody got their book, their Joe Orton book, and it also created that kind of, it's sexy to be gay and self-destructive and, go out at night. And it brought out some qualities. Did you ever find that in people seeing the movie, a
lot of people. I've spoken to people who've told me things like that when they were young, when they saw the movie in their teens, where they weren't sure whether they were gay or not, and or they'll say, I was just realizing that I was gay, and I saw the movie, and it gave me such hope and it helped me understand. And those stories are wonderful when you hear that, because if a movie can do that, then that's just fantastic. I mean, a generation before that, when I was growing up, it was I would watch movies that were all about young people being depressed and neurotic, and I used to think that was like so cool. Like, I wanted to be Francoise Hardy's boyfriend, because they all walked around with the long hair and singing sad songs and wearing black polo necks and sort of being very kind of depressed about everything. And I used to think that was so cool.
Did you want to be if you were going to be a British actor, who would you want to be when you were a kid?
Oh, when I was a kid, well,
did you want to be Albert Finney, or did you want to be?
I tell you, I know it sounds weird. Who I wanted to be was an American actor. I wanted to be Anthony Quinn.
You are Anthony Quinn. You are every ethnicity.
I loved him.
So
him.
Funny.
He was like. And I think this. I mean, he was Mexican American.
He was Mexican. He played Italians.
Yeah, and I, it was just something about the way he looked, the way he sounded. I related to him in a way that I hadn't related to British actors. I admired British actors. I would look at them and I would see wonderful performances and think, oh wow, yeah, I'd love that. But the actors that really got me excited, that really made me, that kind of convinced me that I did really want to be an actor, were invariably American actors.
Well,
and it's to do with what we were talking earlier about the tautness of the language, the kind of the energy, that energy that American actors seem to have, that just completely thrilled me.
And again, that being in contact with maybe their emotions, or sort of actor studio, or the method.
Yeah, absolutely. there used to be this sort of generalization. It's a huge generalization, but there's a certain amount of truth in it. That when it comes, American actors have a way of going from 0 to 60. They can draw a direct line between here and whatever emotional state they need to get to.
Yes.
British actors like to take the scenic route. They like to kind of like meander, go, there's an interesting little alley. Well, let's explore that for a bit. Oh, no, it's not going to work. Oh, look, let's go round the roundabout. Let's go round the roundabout again, just in case.
Yeah.
And so there's and they arrive at the same spot. And that's not that, and the quality of the work is just as good, just as important, but it's a different approach. And but it was that 0 to 60 that I kind of used to kind of make me go, oh my God, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. But it could be fun, to let it all out. So then after you did Prick Up Your Ears, did you feel like you were an overnight success?
Not at all. Not at all. After Prick Up Your Ears, I went and did the first job immediately after Prick Up Your Ears was a TV movie for the BBC called Blatt, which is a Russian word for con or fraud. And it was a kind of comedy drama about a Russian guy who gets sprung from prison in Russia by the Russian government to kind of pull off a scam in London. And it's like a little, it was a funny, sweet little movie. And it was just and it was the first job that came up. I didn't think twice about it. I remember years ago, my father said, I can't remember the context of the conversation, but I just remember the phrase when he said, real men don't fight, real men pay their bills. And that's always kind of stayed with me. And whenever I've been out of work, or whenever a job's finished,
right,
and it's a very real sensation. There's a feeling in me. There's a little voice in my head that's kind of saying, "Well, they found you out now. This is the last gig you're going to get." Someone's going to go, Oh, there's been a terrible mistake. I'm ever so sorry. We meant Albert Molina. I'm terribly sorry. You're going to have to give all the stuff back. I'm sorry. And it's a very real thing. So whenever something comes up, I mean, just the other day, my agent in London said, listen, do me a favor. After you finish the play, don't just take the first thing that comes along, please. Take your time, relax. Because she knows, she's been my agent for 35 years. She knows.
Yes.
She knows what I'm like.
I don't. 2 days is. Now, and did you keep in touch with Gary? Because he immediately, it seems to me, after kind of prick up your ears, then went this sort of studio film route.
Yeah, he was, Sid and Nancy. Well, he'd made Sid and Nancy just before, I think.
Just before.
He because he loves movies. I mean, he loves movies, and I think he's also become a producer, director. We haven't kept in touch. We stayed in touch for a while. I haven't seen him for.
It was after such an intense experience.
Yeah, because we did a play after we did a play together after the movie, and so we were chums for.
That must have been surreal.
It wasn't. Well, this is the thing.
Killed you.
Yeah, no, it's not. It wasn't at all, because I think in the kind of English context, British actors, because the industry is so much smaller there.
Right.
English actors are constantly going from film to theatre to radio to television, back again. It's we've only got one union. It's not like it's not like this huge sort of big corporate industry that's going on. But but we stayed in touch for a while. Then life happens, and one goes their different ways.
So when you did, was the hardest thing you ever had to do slapping Sally Field?
Well, it was the most.
Not with my.
It was the most.
not without my daughter.
Yeah.
Without my daughter.
Right.
At the time,
You were so
it was
bad in that.
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard to do, but Sally was so fantastic. She was so game for that movie. I mean, she was so collaborative, and I think she realised that I was feeling a little kind of bad about having to kind of knock her about, and I was constantly apologizing. I was apologizing to the point where she kind of went, "Stop fucking apologizing, just do your job."
Oh, Sally Field.
So I just and because she was all padded up. I mean, underneath
she's
the burqa.
tiny,
I know,
and
but she had the
you're so
shoulder
big.
pads, she had the knee pads, she had the hip pads. I mean, she was well padded.
Yes.
And she said to me, you can knock 7 shades of shit out of me. I'm not going to feel it.
Yeah.
As long as you don't hit my face, you're fine.
Right.
So we kind of choreographed it, and we worked, and I was kind of like all namby-pamby, kind of go, well, I'll just hit you there, and I'll just hit you there. She's going, no, go for it. And then she said, you better go for this, Fred, because I'm sure as hell going to go for you. Because I'm going to put up a fight. Because there's no way I just lie here and take it. I'm going to put up a fight. And I went, okay. So we got into it, and we choreographed it very, very carefully, obviously, because nobody wants to get hurt. But so I'm dragging her, then I throw her on the floor, then I get on top of her, and I'm slapping her, and then she's kicking. And at the end of it, she was wearing these trainers with this very distinctive pattern on the sole.
Shoes for Americans who might not know what that is.
Shoes, exactly. Yeah, sort of sneakers.
Tennis shoes, yeah.
Yeah, like tennis shoes. And you don't call them trainers over here? Oh, how funny! And I found a footprint of hers right on my crutch at the end of one take. So I realised I didn't feel it, but I realised she was really kind of the legs akimbo. We had a great time doing it in the end. I mean, it was a hard thing to shoot. I mean, because it wasn't just that. There was another scene where I'd drag her around the room, and it was a lot of slaps. There was a lot of tough stuff to do. But she made it, and I love Sally Field. I love her so much. She was so thoughtful and protective of not just her character, but also me. As a fellow actor, she did everything she could to make those scenes possible without me. I think she could tell I was finding it hard. I got to be honest. I was finding it hard to just knock her about. And I know it's only a movie, and I know it wasn't real in any kind of real way. But still, we had to find some emotional space where that would happen. And she was fantastic. She was such a great kind of partner to work on those scenes.
Well, those are, I mean, it's hard, again, and especially in meeting people that you admire and, you have to hit them. It must be and they're filming it, Yeah. That's when you leave and you go, this is a very strange business.
Well, she gave me, she was so sweet. At the end of filming, she gave me a present. And she gave me a watch. And on the back of the watch, she inscribed, "Not without you."
Aww.
Which I thought was really lovely. So
now,
I couldn't have hit her that hard.
Very
meanwhile,
true.
she permanently impaired you. Now, you also told me that you had a very nice meeting with Sidney Lumet, the great director, Sidney Lumet.
Yeah. Well, I was doing a play in New York on Broadway, a play called Art by Yasmina Reza.
Wonderful, I saw it.
And Alan Alda, who was one of the cast, who was like he was like our spiritual dad during the run of that show. There was only 3 of us in the play: Alan, myself, and Victor Garber. And Alan was very much like our dad. He was so supportive and caring, and he would take us out for dinners and stuff like that. And one weekend, he was heading back to his house, I think in the Hamptons somewhere, and he'd been invited to a dinner, and he had roped us in, Victor and I. So we were going to have dinner with him and a whole bunch of all these people out there, and it was a very, very, it was all kind of like Broadway dinner. I mean, everybody was there, and we were all in different tables, and I was sat, unbelievably, in between Stanley Donen and Sidney Lumet.
Pretty good.
And Peter Stone, the librettist, was in fact, I think it was his party. He was at the table as well. I mean, I thought, I've landed in a tub of butter here. This is like, and I made a conscious decision. I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm just going to listen, because these people know a shitload more than I ever will. So I'm just going to listen. And I'm sitting there, and and lots of chat. It's great fun. And Sidney and Stanley, because by this time we were best friends, started talking about movies. And I was knocked out, because they were very happy to talk. That they had obviously lots of mutual friends that they had. They were talking about films they'd made, films they wanted. That was the interesting thing, talking about the movies they wanted to make, the movies that they never quite managed to make. And what came out of this conversation was both of them were bemoaning the fact that neither of them could raise money to make a movie. And this was 1998.
Yeah.
So now I think Sidney had gone on to make a film since then, before he passed away. But at that point in time, they were both like, couldn't get arrested. And I remember just thinking, well, and I was just beginning to think about films as maybe, or maybe getting involved in movies other than as an actor. Just the beginnings were just beginning to kind of percolate. And I'm thinking, well, if these two can't get a movie off the ground, what chance have I got? But it was the most wonderful evening, just hearing these two masters talking about movies. And what was so delightful for me, and so kind of heartwarming, was that they were talking about movies with a kind of hunger and an enthusiasm that you would normally associate with young filmmakers just starting, just getting their first break. They were talking about films with such enthusiasm and such light and energy in their eyes. It was brilliant. It was just brilliant, and it made me kind of want to tell myself off anytime I start complaining about things not working out, or I didn't get that, I really wanted that part, oh poor me. These two giants were still kind of climbing the mountain. It was a great night.
Is there something about, I know how important it is to be in the British theater, but is there something in the kind of lexicon of show business of being on Broadway and a Broadway part?
Oh yeah.
And a hit show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like, if you're on Broadway and you're in a hit show, New York opens up. If I may be a little sort of crude,
please.
This is what I was told by a New York actor who said to me, "Man, you're in a hit show on Broadway. New York opens up like a beautiful vagina. You're in a flop. It shuts up like a duck's ass."
That's so funny.
And I just remember thinking, you know, it's kind of prosaic, but yeah, it's kind of true. It's kind of true. And I, you know, I never forget when we were doing art. My daughter, who lives in London, she was, I don't know, how old was she then? Let's work it out. She would have been like 17, 18. Mm-hmm. She came over to New York with her mum and stayed at the apartment where I was renting. She came to see the show, and we went out for dinner a couple of times. And both times we went out to dinner, she was only there for about 5 days. Both times we went out, we would arrive at the restaurant, and the maitre d' would say, "Good evening, Mr. Molina. Welcome. Your table's this way." And both times my daughter said, "Have you been here before?" And both times I had to say, "No, never been. It's my first time." And that's what happens in New York. If you're in a hit, that's what happens. Like the whole city because everything is interdependent. Mm.
Yeah.
Hit shows generate revenue for the restaurants, for the stores, for everybody.
Hotels, yeah.
So there's it's a kind of very integrated economy in that way, which isn't quite the same thing in London, because in London you can be in a hit show and it doesn't really because there isn't the same. The community isn't locked in the same, whatever it is, 17 square miles of Manhattan, and that's what makes New York so unique.
Right.
Is the tightness of that community, and the fact that you're on 45th Street in a play. Everybody, all the businesses and commercial entities around there are kind of a part of your success, and it's so that makes it a unique place in that way.
So I just want to interrupt because
Go
we're getting close on time, but I did just check. Today's a holiday.
That's right. It's President's Day, correct?
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about parking.
Oh, good. Oh, there you go.
So we can go a little longer if you're okay with it. So so I just wanted to interject that.
I would keep going. I'm curious about when you got the play Art and you open up, and part of the your character has these kind of show-stopping comic monologues, and I'm curious that when you open the play, is that both thrilling but also a trap? I'm gonna kill. Oh, this is gonna be
well, the thing
great.
It's both. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's both. It can be very exciting in the terms of you get a real chance to let your character sort of when your character's talking, if he or she has the big speech, then that's a need that your character has that no other character has at that moment. And so there's something wonderful about being able to reveal whatever it is that's happening there. It can be a bit daunting in terms of learning it. It can be a bit daunting in terms of keeping it interesting, not playing it as a monologue. In art, Ivan has that big. It's like a 5-page monologue, which has no punctuation. If you look at the printed version,
it's show stopping.
Yeah. And when we were rehearsing, Yasmina Reza, the author, was in with us for a week or so, and I happened to refer to the speech as a monologue, and she said she's French, as you know French. She said, "Oh no, it's not a monologue, it's a dialogue, but no one else is speaking."
Okay.
and I remember thinking, what does that mean? But I realized exactly what she meant, that she was encouraging me not to approach it like a monologue.
Yes.
That at any moment now, someone else might just kind of say,
Yes.
might say something. And I think she was wary of that, the trap that you're talking about, where you can get into this trap. Oh, here comes the big speech.
Yeah.
And you kind of like prepare yourself and launch. And of course that if that happens too many times, then it ceases to be part of the play. It becomes like your aria.
And it's a great play. I'm just going to mention very briefly, it's about two men who are friendship that's torn apart by one man buying a painting.
That's right, yeah. And the third friend trying to kind of keep the peace between them.
Yeah, and you can play it in any era, which I think
absolutely.
is great about it.
Absolutely.
I saw a revival of it recently.
And the play's been done constantly because it's so simple. One set, 3 actors. It could apply. And in fact, I think there's been a female version done, where there's been a few little rewrites, a couple of little adjustments, because there's a lot of off-stage characters mentioned, like Ivan's parents and his stepmother, who creates all the problem at the proposed wedding. There's his bride to be. There's friends and people, exes that are mentioned, and they just changed that. They just regendered those characters that are mentioned, and it apparently worked really well.
So we only have a little bit of time left, so I want to get into Long Day's Journey into Night, which you're doing at the Geffen.
That's right.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Tamara has seen it. And you're brilliant. I have not seen it yet.
Thank you.
But we'll see it.
Brilliant.
I'm going to compare. I saw the Jack Lemmon version on Broadway.
Yes,
that was very interesting, and I think I saw Jason Robards
in the movie version with Ralph Richardson
Yes.
and Katharine Hepburn. Yes.
I've seen that kind of variety of O'Neill. But how did you get involved with this play?
Well, it started with a kind of a working friendship with Jane Kaczmarek, who is playing Mary Tyrone, and she and I met doing a radio production of View from the Bridge for the BBC. And we just got on really well. And I remember saying to her, I'd like to work with you again. I've really enjoyed this. And then we ended up doing two radio productions. And then last summer, we were at the Williamstown Theatre Festival in Massachusetts, and we did a play there, a new play. And it was at that point where we started talking about doing something this year. And we were throwing titles to each other and saying, well, what about this play? Yeah, okay. What about that play? Yeah, maybe. And we kept circling round and round, and eventually I said, "Look, there's only one play, really. It's Long Day's Journey. I mean, we just got to do it. It's the 300-pound gorilla in the room we're ignoring." And then there was the whole issue with rights, because there was a production about to start in New York, which is one that Jessica Lange did with Gabriel Byrne and Michael Shannon and John Gallagher, and so it was. It wasn't possible to do it immediately, and then the Geffen got the rights to do it with the understanding that the New York production had to close first, so we had to wait till that had its run. So it was really just it came out of a sort of collaborative, creative conversation, and then our director came on board, and we just started work on it, and it's been a really fantastic experience. We've had, it's a tough play to put on.
Yes.
And it's a hard play in the sense of, it's a long play. It's a play that, audiences aren't so used to seeing a play this long these days. A 90-minute play without an interval is kind of like the norm now, it seems to be. You've got a play that's got an interval, but it's got a running time of 3 hours and 20 minutes. That's including the interval. And it's or the intermission, as you like to say here, and it's so it's a big family drama, and hopefully it takes you somewhere, and it's a beautiful writing, and these are great roles, and I'm 63 now, and I'm now part of a generation where there's some really great roles for men my age in the classical repertoire. So you might see me doing quite a few revivals for a while, because most young playwrights are writing for their generation as it should be, and but in the classical repertoire there's some great roles for older actors.
This was a play that O'Neill had put aside. He said it could only be played after his death.
That's right, and his
pretty dramatic.
Yeah, and I think partly because it's so autobiographical.
Yeah.
And lots of productions have tried to eke out that fact. And in fact, in our production, there's a little stylistic thing that happens that kind of makes it clear that there is a sort of autobiographical link between Eugene O'Neill and the family that are in the play. And other productions have really got rid of all of that. Other productions have been very kind of skeletal in terms of cutting the play. The film versions were always cut down to 2 hours and a bit. But there's been a lot of versions of this play, and Jason Robards, oddly enough, that you saw he played Jamie, the older son, in one with Ralph Richardson, and then years later he played the father in a production. And he was a big O'Neill exponent.
Yes,
Jason
he and
Robards,
his wife, Colleen Dewhurst, I think I saw them in Do All Wilderness.
Yeah. They were big sort of exponents of Eugene O'Neill.
And are there any? It's about family dynamics, and obviously very sad. And anything from your own family that you draw upon, because this is a guy who's a larger than life character. He's an actor.
Oh yeah, there's a lot in there, and I think
it's dense.
And it's not to do with my particular family. I think anybody playing this role or be getting involved in a play like this will find resonances in their own families, because I subscribe to the theory that we're all fucked up, and the difference is just in the grade, just in the level of fucked upness.
Yes,
and that ultimately anyone, and most people, certainly people who are creative, and I really believe this, I think usually come from some kind of screwed up family background. There's some dynamic in there that's kind of a bit off kilter, and it's what gives creative people the need to be creative. It's like, I always tell people, becoming an actor or a writer or an artist of any kind isn't because you've got something else to offer. Mm-hmm. It's some kind of genetic flaw. You've got something missing, and your creativity is an attempt to bridge that gap, to fill that gap. So we're not doing it because we've got something special.
Right.
We're doing it because we're actually missing something.
I agree. It's like trying to put pieces together of something that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And nothing like doing a play. Is there anything in doing the play that has made you discover? Because each night is different, and some nights.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. There's no, as James says in the play, what's the use of false pride and pretense? Doing this play has actually given me the permission to forgive my dad for a lot of crap, and not because it was really, really awful stuff, really, but it's just given me the permission to kind of go, you know what, it's okay, because he was human, and that is in itself is like worth the price of admission. That in itself is worth doing anything, and I hope one day, my daughter's a photographer. I hope one day in her creativity she'll turn around one day and say, yeah, you know what, Dad, I can forgive you.
Aww. Well, Alfred Molina, it's been a joy. Please come back.
I will, with pleasure, anytime.
We'll have our tea and scones.
Yes.
They gave me scones and they gave me lemon curd.
Yes,
It's
we
an
did.
honor.
For all you lemon curd fans out there.
And thank you for all your wonderful
it's a
work
pleasure.
over
Oh,
the
It's
it's
years.
been
fun.
amazing. You can find Alfred on Twitter at @officialmolina. Thank you, Alfred, so much. You can buy Illeana's book, I Blame Dennis Hopper, on Amazon, also at bookstores. It's out in paperback now. Do buy the book. You're going to learn so much about Illeana. It's a fascinating read. Also, like our page on Facebook. Check out our website, illeanaspodcast.com.
Yes, and as I always say, everyone's life is a movie. I believe everyone's life is a movie
agree with you.
a beginning, a middle, and an end.
I agree
I think
with
I'm in
you.
the middle. We're in the middle.
Let's hope we're all
Sadly,
Oh,
this is the end.
it reminded me of a wonderful joke. You know the 5 stages of an actor's career?
No.
Who's Alfred Molina? What's Alfred Molina's availability? I must have Alfred Molina. Get me a young Alfred Molina. Whatever happened to Alfred Molina?
On that note, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheerio.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network. The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.